what you're about to hear may not be absolutely accurate, but through my experience, this is how it was. So biodiesel essentially is the diesel that engines were built to run on originally. When Sir Diesel created the diesel engine, he built it to run on peanut oil. Then they found crude oil. Coincidentally, he died shortly afterwards, and there was the evolution of the fuel industry and the diesel industry. So biodiesel essentially, in layman's terms, is cooking oil with additives which becomes diesel. So you can drive the biodiesel from multiple sources. The most practical source would to be from used cooking oil, because it's no longer valuable, and other sources could be from soya plants, agriculture, starch, and so on. So there are different ways of acquiring biodiesel, but the most practical way in today's market is to get it from restaurants' frying bins. I think biodiesel as a source of fuel is a much better alternative to the current diesel. So diesel is very dirty. If you've worked in a farm environment or seen the bottom of a diesel tank, there's often residue at the bottom with all the impurities that have sat in the diesel. So the refineries, when they push the diesel out into the marketplace, don't refine the diesel enough, then they don't clean it enough, which means that your engine is not burning efficiently when the fuel goes through the system, which creates exhaust smoke. And if you look at trucks and you scale it up, it becomes quite a nuisance in terms of all the harmful carbon dioxides and the filth within traditional diesel, or crude diesel rather. So biofuel and biodiesel in particular, being earth-made, the bio of the fuel, it is a lot cleaner, almost 85% cleaner to the engine, to the earth, the air, as well as the actual components within the vehicle and the operational temperature of the vehicle itself. So because you can drive it from the land and from waste, it's more effective on the pocket, it's more effective for the environment, and more effective for the vehicle. So therefore I would agree to say that biodiesel is a better option than diesel. Not enough people use it. There are a lot of reasons for that, but unfortunately it's quite a sad situation as to why. I think ultimately, if business wasn't the structure business currently is, then from a smart thinking collective, we would all be utilizing biodiesel worldwide much more than we are now. So at the moment, with the current structure of the fracking and deriving oil from the ocean, the quantity of diesel is a lot more readily available than the biodiesel at the moment. However, the infrastructure of diesel and oil has been going for decades, which means that there is a system in place. However, with that in mind, if we created a certain amount, or an ecosystem rather, that could support the production of biodiesel, it would be a plausible option and certainly a way to go about doing things. A lot of farmers these days, when I say a lot, a few farmers these days have been growing the stock for biodiesel, pressing it themselves and turning it into fuel and running their farms in a sustainable manner. So if we upscale that to incorporate industry as well as our daily requirements on the road, it could be something to look at into the future. However, as I mentioned earlier, there are challenges. And regulations, regulatory challenges are the first problem. So South Africa, for example, have mandated, it's a soft mandate, they have suggested or encouraged for fuel stations to put 5% of the mix per litre of diesel to be 5% biodiesel and then 95% regular diesel, which is a start. However, 5% is quite negligible in terms of the impact and the usage of the fuel itself. So if we could start looking at greater quantities and build it into our legislation as to the utilization of a greater portion of biodiesel in every single engine, car, bakkie, boat, aircraft, the industry itself would grow. So challenge number one is the legislation. Challenge number two is the actual OEMs, which is the original equipment manufacturers for vehicles, trucks, and so on. So the engine manufacturers like Volvo and Scania, New Holland, and a few other progressive OEMs have become quite au fait and quite supportive of biodiesel. Like, say for example, if a farmer purchases a New Holland tractor, he can run his entire tractor on 100% biodiesel under warranty, and the service and maintenance plan won't be affected. So New Holland are heading in the right direction. The Volvo, you can go up to about 30% biodiesel blend, which is 30% obviously biodiesel, 70% regular diesel, and then the Scania is also in a similar ratio as well. So you do have some forward-thinking, technology-driven manufacturers, but that's like a small portion of the market in comparison to the full available option out there. So why biodiesel isn't being accepted into the fuel market, and is because from doing a bit of research and speaking to a few different sources, my understanding, and it's not necessarily how it may or may not be, but my understanding is that within the fuel system there is an injector that the fuel gets pumped into the cylinders from, and predominantly there are 5 manufacturers of the fuel injectors, and 4 of them are based in Korea, and I think 1 is in Taiwan. And the only component within the fuel system the biodiesel goes through that gets marginally affected is the fuel injector itself. Because when you take used cooking oil and filtered it and cleaned it, you'll add potassium hydroxide and magnesium. So the magnesium gives it a slightly solvent property, which means although it's cleaning your fuel engine, which is reducing the temperature of the vehicle and the noise of the diesel engine, 0.2% of the fuel injector gets affected, and that effectively creates wear on the fuel injector. And for those reasons, the original equipment manufacturers won't allow more than 5% of a diesel blend to be in their vehicles. So, saying it quite tongue-in-cheek, being Korean based, trying to encourage the Koreans to change their legislation, the manufacturing patterns and so on, to incorporate biodiesel, which is something that they're not necessarily too focused on compared to the global market in terms of who uses diesel over biodiesel. It's quite a long fight, but other than the injector within the fuel line system, the entire process becomes more efficient, cleaner, and less noisier, and runs for less. So if you put a running biodiesel within the engine, it will effectively make it a longer lasting engine. Okay, so going back to the question, market barriers. So number 1 is legislation. Number 2 is the original equipment manufacturers are not allowing it to be warranted or included in their service plans. So also what this means is if, say for example, a transporter purchases a truck for 1.8 million, he doesn't want a single thing to go wrong with that truck because he is now liable for 1.8 million, and he's got a fleet of 10, so it scales up. And so anything to adjust the service warranty will be negative on the business. So for truckers to look at alternate fuels, including biodiesel, it puts their warranties at risk. And the challenge with that is when you go to the original manufacturers in South Africa at the head office level and say, can you please get a letter of approval to say that we can run the biofuel into the system and at what percentage, they kick back and then they send you to head office, be it in Tokyo or Europe. So it's a long upward climb, and then once you do have the documentation, the next set of challenges come in, and that is you're now fighting against the major oil companies. So your BPs, Shells, Caltex and so on, they will have equipment on their key accounts site, So say for example I'm a trucker and or transporter rather, and I've got 300 trucks and I set it at a depot. The likes of a Shell, for example, or a BP will set up tanks on site, and that will mean that there is a certain contract that gets put into place. The contracts can range anything between 5 to 20 years to indefinite. Or alternatively, what will happen is that the fuel stations or the fuel providers will put the equipment in for free and say that should you put any other fuel inside there, they'll take the equipment off site, which is a hack for the user and also an expense. So for example, and the way this comes into another barrier to entry in terms of the practicality of biodiesel is if I'm a biodiesel producer and I take it to a large transporter, I have then got to get my own fuel line system installed and then bled into their fuel line system on site, and only for a 5% blend of biofuel over 95% of a blend of standard diesel. So from a business side of things, the transporters, although it does save the environment, it adds to their branding and marketing because of the green aspect of it, that adds to the beneficial usage of their vehicles, as well as it costs less, then I think it's unnecessary administration to have additional equipment on site, and also get concerned that they could breach contracts with their original diesel providers. So those are the three main barriers to market, but it does branch out from there in terms of the source of the biodiesel being quite expensive. So number 4 in terms of barrier of biodiesel would be the cost of making biofuel is a lot greater than one would think. So other than your business operational costs such as staffing, logistics, warehousing, normal operational, light, water, internet, there's also the acquisition of the biofuel, the cooking oil. So the cooking oil is around about 5 Rand a litre these days on collection. So if I had to go to a local fish and chips shop and I collect once a week their used oil, I would have to pay them 5 Rand a litre per litre of sunflower oil or palm oil. That's before even doing the process and cleaning, adding the chemicals, distributing, selling, marketing, and so forth. So the reason why the cost of the source is quite expensive is because the actual market for used oil has sprouted up. And what I mean by that is other countries in the world that utilize biodiesel, for example Europe, it's mandated for them to have 5% in the fuel mix nationwide. Within that marketplace, there isn't enough supply to match the demand, so they have to import from other countries. Needless to say, South Africa is one of those countries, and for South Africans to make the biodiesel locally, it's too expensive because the South Africans are exporting it to Europe. So when the cooking oil is not being exported, it's also being sold into the township communities. So what will happen, which is not really good, is that the used oil would then be put through a bleach so that it looks clearer, and then put into little bottles and sold to the poorer communities, which is excessively bad, because the reason why cooking oil becomes bad is because it becomes cancerous. Another reason why it's quite expensive to source the cooking oil from kitchens is because the feed and animal farms are utilizing the oil within the mix that the animals eat. So say for example, if you go to a pig farm, the pig feed has used cooking oil to bind the feed, which means that the pigs are eating the cancerous cancerous used oil that's going to our shelves and we're consuming it. So it's just not a great situation at the moment, but however it's a very real situation. That's what's currently happening. Be a registered biodiesel producer, seller and provider is about a 22-page checklist. I mean, don't quote me there, but it's absolutely ridiculous, the requirements You have to give away, or you have to set up your business with a previously disadvantaged person. You have to source the oil from a farm directly that is not utilized for food purposes. It needs to go to an independent lab. The lab then needs to be to give the go-ahead to say that it can go to market, and then only you can deliver it to a customer thereafter, which is not really good for business, for timelines, cost, or the supply chain demand. So it's not necessarily conducive to the utilization of biodiesel in the local marketplace either. So there are really a whole bunch of reasons why biodiesel is not being utilized more effectively here. However, on the other side of that coin, there are a few wine farms that I did business with, and they've started to introduce it into their fuel mix, and I've been extremely happy with the results. Yeah.
I'm staying here. I've been here since 2013, and we're greening this strip of a street. It's an industrial complex, and of course with industry you can imagine all the challenges. The rate of waste to green, also the waste area, it happens too fast. We've got to find ways of diverting the waste, but the space has become greener. Donations from banks, maybe for the trees. Standard Bank gave these trees. We made the boxes here for the trees to go inside. That brings in a very collaborative element in the street. The people in the street are supposed to be doing business with each other, making a little local industry so we can generate an
the Skills
income
Village
here.
has its own thing.
Sure. So with the plant boxes, some of the people in the street have taken ownership. They've either changed it, put their own boxes, like those people there with the wooden boxes. They made their own thing, so which means, once again, the thing we're talking about, they've taken ownership. They've moved away from our style and they've gone for a wilder grasses and things. But it shows you share something with people and then they take over. Like the security guards we were talking about, they were just inspired. I didn't say to them, hey guys, we're actually greening the space or whatever. Just rocked up here one day. There they were, putting their own bricks there, making their own garden. Yeah. So, and I mean, they sit there all day and watch the cars, and direct cars. So for them, man, we still have to ask them how they feel. We still haven't asked them. I myself haven't asked them how they feel about it. But it was wonderful, because it was a thing that we wanted. The experiment that we started there by growing outside the crash there. We made those boxes specifically and strawberries and maybe an odd plant. But when the gardens have been there, people have not. They've just left them as they are. Once again, showing people, it's kind of confusing, I think, to them. I'm just imagining. There's no fence. Wow, what do you think? Can I pick? Can I not pick? You know what I mean? Yeah. But as I say, sweet potato leaves from the Congolese sisters, because they call them Matembelele and Koma, or Mozambique, I think, I'm not sure.
Sweet potato.
Sweet potato leaves, yeah. Those you cook, I think, potassium, something in the sweet potato, phosphorus in the sweet potato leaves. Something. Yeah. So, and the strawberries, like I said.
Yeah.
And now, but it's this whole space for an individual with sporadic partners coming every now and then. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's Shane, it's Lily, it's you folk today, it's them on that day they decide. Brother Kutsu has come along, Simone was here working, now it's Brother Simo. But there's one constant, and also Brother Stephen helps with the watering. Yeah. There's lots of networks. The current one here with Hanneke and Sebastian, we decided to go with Permafunk and Social Fermentation. I mean, it was just a planting together, eating together thing. It's as basic as I can get it. Yeah.
The Heritage Day thing is also like bringing people together to kind of start that again in a way.
Yeah.
There's no
continuations of these gatherings,
It's just
get the produce there,
there's no real
grow it, share seeds. It is a small economy because you do save, and it's good because you know what I mean. You're getting quality stuff also from people who grow, people who know. I get most of the stuff from friends.
Do you go still to Bertram's?
I do go to the community Bertram's thing.
There's a nice garden there.
Also to fill up space. And I have this, I'm sharing something that I have this crazy belief that the soil can improve over time. So I think even when they give me bad seeds sometimes, I just have this firm belief that if I'm working with good soil, when I'm working and I'm really working in the soil, that seed, generations later, maybe. It's just a man's thought.
No.
But yes, I do get some from the community there.
Okay.
You go there, you sign a form, and I've been trying to tell everyone who needs seeds. People don't. I don't know how information gets accessed in community. People either don't know, or nobody tells them. Yeah, sure. But the city of Joburg, I don't put my faith in councils and government structures and things. I'm not saying that they're bad elements, but they're just there for me. I have access to that one there, I go there. Yes, I'm part of the government. I go there, I access the seed. That's how I feel about it. So that happens, but a lot of the stuff, I'll be honest with you, I get from my friends and the people in their network, Food and Trees Africa, or the other independent greeners, so to speak, that sometimes work with government or not with government, but the majority of things, that's where I, as an individual, as an organization, we get most of our stuff independently, I think, from the people we know. Sometimes, like the climate train, that was a government activity. Yeah, an agency got us on board. The money came from government, which is us, the people, once again. So it's our money at the end of the day. Look, for me, personally, you eat healthier. Once you start growing yourself, I'm healthier than I've ever been. You know what I mean? Really, because I grow my own stuff. We grow our own stuff, No, we don't buy all of it from ourselves, but just being able to pick whatever 50% or sometimes even 80% of the stuff that you're eating in your salad. Hey, you know what I mean? And people that have come and eaten, I've seen their diets change a little bit. Hey, next week or whenever they see you again, I'm starting to eat greens now in a jokey manner.
Really, people say that?
Yeah.
It's great.
Sort of like jokey sarcasm kind of thing.
That's why people have never even thought about eating greens fresh. Like people cook, they cook green leafy vegetables. That's how it's made. So to even think about spinach not being cooked is like you say by saying I eat in a salad. People are like, what? So you can have, there's like a lot of, when you're dealing on the behavioral stuff, it's very interesting like how that seeps in. Even, with those security guards that started to help clean up the space.
So the physical space maybe takes a long time for people to get their hands on it and actually maintain the transformation. But as we said, there have been behavioral transformations, people eating differently or people taking plants home for the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even thinking about taking plants. But I also think I sometimes get a feeling of people taking more I'd use like ownership for space, that they can also influence space. Like I think that's positive so it's not that it's only theirs, it's that it's also theirs, you can
also theirs.
Yeah, and I think that especially in a city like Joburg, but it happens in a lot of places. I think also people have been moved historically, maybe those things are still very like apparent to people about home, but Joburg is a very fluid place, and I don't feel that people really think of it as theirs, So you see that also in how spaces are used, and I think it's really
it's a transition point.
Yeah, especially some places, and even more than others. But so I think that also so that's in that environment. And then when you're in places where people have been for maybe a little bit longer, or for a while, or forever, there's also like a sense of, you know, this is our space as well, and this is the path I use to get there every day, and, you know, like about just how they see space and where they throw their waste, and like, so I like that has been quite positive. That is also, you know, it's also people's space that they can define. They don't just wait for government to come and clean that up or do stuff. Like they have agency, and I think that's what's so inspiring for me. Even today, like what happened today with us, or even me coming, and there's like all this nice stuff been happening. It's like I love the idea of just like agency, like people doing stuff. You know, whether it's an individual, as a collective, like as a like bigger society. It's like that sense of agency and people just doing it. It's so inspiring because people are doing it, and then it influences everybody else, and so more people are inspired to do something. There's like a whole pride aspect to some of that stuff. It's like taking ownership of that shit. Like it is cool. We need to make that stuff cool. Being healthy, our heritage, supporting like that stuff, and valuing ourselves and each other starts with that stuff. Like that if we need to, however we can get people to love nature, like it's okay.
There's also that thing that's good. Like also that thing of just maybe owning that word owning, but anyway, use the word owning.
No, like it's
owning your
okay.
your immediate space. You know what I mean? Owning your immediate space.
Or taking responsibility for it. I don't think it means that it's only yours.
The thing that everybody runs away from, responsibility. Take responsibility.
Also my responsibility.
For the sport immediately outside your gate.
Do with your waste.
Yeah. As soon as you step out your gate, that's your spot. You know what I mean? It's kind of like if you could green that spot. Imagine.
But it's just, I think, about creating a dialogue here, starting a dialogue and trying to make it funky so people engage, you know, like a lot of what Ambush was about in the beginning was about conserving and celebrating, you know, ecological and cultural heritage. That was the base of the whole thing, that finding ways to celebrate and conserve ecological and cultural heritage, and the diversity is so vital. Like, and the valuing of that diversity, that we, on all levels, the more diverse we are, the more resilient we are. Like, and things are we're going to need that knowledge. We're going to need those things because we're just reducing, and it's from all an agrobiodiversity and all that stuff. You know, it's like essential. So that was, for me, it guided a lot of my thinking around that, and why we really needed to find ways to celebrate this diversity, and ways to share those stories and to capture them in new ways that like it will change so many aspects of us, like also going forward, especially as a diverse country, even more so. It has another complexity to that,
and especially our food. Wow, man, food,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Wow.
So
a lot of the just general health, man, is just, of course, we all know food, the way people eat.
No, there's a lot of problems with all the systems, but this is about, I think a lot of what this was about, really getting the people who are affected, so like people who eat, to start to realize, shit, you know, there's other things out there, and what is accessible, what's not accessible, and why, you know. Then you can get deeper into some of those more like things, but people, nothing will change, you know. And if there are, you know, that these powers that are creating those situations which are completely unequal, completely they just cause available in the places. Why is it like that, you know?
Sure.
And everybody needs to be fighting for this change. You can't only expect it from government, and you need, you know, we need to be doing it, and we can. We need to be doing it, we can do it, and then we can demand for it, and that like we have a role to play as people on the ground, as consumers, as just general people, or people, you know, you have different, you're not powerful, but you are powerful, you know. So it's just it's not clear. Like, I think that's where Ambush has really been. It's like starting to create a dialogue really at that level. And all of these about just bringing people together who care. Some people, you know, come together, it's like they really care. You know, how do you get into places where people doing other things, you know, like who don't have this in their minds, you know, but they are the ones who are being the most impacted and the least resilient out of every, you know, like often, because there's no options. There are already no options, and it's only going to get worse. Like, If you look at some of these things, and that's how to get better if we make it happen. Like, so it's very performance. It's like a performance art, really. We get in there, we get dressed up. We've got like these kind of tie-dyed, like overalls. Yeah, my overalls were tie-dyed. They don't look so tight anymore. But and we like just get into character. We have songs and things a lot in different languages to try and get people to like not even realize that they're learning. You know, so it's just cool. It's about making gardening cool. Like, you know, even we were doing this stuff, and then the Gangster Gardener was also out, and for me that was also like sun, because we've always been on this like Siblomile Nje, like, which is just like, you know, we're just chilling on the street, but it's just we're just flowering, we're just blooming. We're like, that shit for me.
And we're greening the space.
But it's just like, it's so powerful because you get people
but
just
I mean,
to
imagine if it gets
engage,
to that level
where
greening your street corner is the cool thing, you know, where you actually show.
And eating fucking I know there's been a lot of like these very nice seeds that are planted in people's minds to create. I think that has been where we functioned, and that's been good because I've seen positive responses from that stuff.
We ambush spaces.
We ambush.
we
Siblomile Nje. And then
ambush.
And then it became an organization. Yeah, kind of. And then there's a few other things that are all going on at the same time, really. So there's more this
the permafunk and social fermentation thing. That really started when Sebastian came around.
Yeah, so it was like driven by,
Yeah. Me and Philip had been working on something called permafunk. Because
Really?
me and Lily had gone to the permaculture course in East London with the permaculture people there. Now when we came back, or even before that actually, when I was going there, me and Philip were working on this permafunk idea. Sort of like making it more urban, you know, like the streets, make it cool, you know, it's like, okay, yeah, no. The whole street factor. So I wanted to feed the greening into that thing, because, you know, people just buy too many All-Stars or too many whatever. So maybe you can buy 4 All-Stars and then do a greening with the 5th All-Star maybe, kind of thing. So bring the street in. Perma-funk, because funk has got the, you know, it's like an urban thing. You don't expect funk wasn't born in the countryside. Sure. So Sebastian came and latched on. He's like, yeah, I know perma-funk and social fermentation, because he wanted to brew stuff like beer, marula beer, local beer. He's interested in that. So, but social fermentation, where people gather and eat together, sort of fermenting.
I went and did my master's overseas in tropical forestry stuff, and then when I came, I did my research in South Africa, and we went together to the Western Cape. I saw all these like spaces throughout the city. If you've seen in Cape Town, there's just a lot of like these empty spaces in the middle of places. They were just vacant spaces, and it was such a strange thing. I remember speaking about like what are these spaces like being used for? They're just these forgotten spaces in the middle of other things, you know. And so this whole idea of forgotten space is really just, I think, for me, inspired what we started to do as Ambush, like really questioning how people use space, how people use the city, how they interact with space, how they interact with each other in space, like what is going on in those spaces, and like this whole idea of forgotten spaces and how those can be used to transform
organisms that are vulnerable to ocean acidification. These are calcifying mollusks and corals, and they have a harder time building their calcium carbonate shells under these lower pH conditions. In modern day upwelling ecosystems, we do see calcifying mollusks such as oysters and mussels. However, reef-building corals are found in very few upwelling systems today. Furthermore, in upwelling ecosystems, you don't just have to worry about acidification. We mentioned that the characteristics of that water is that it's also very low in oxygen. And this is important because some of the groups that we've seen in studies to be more resistant to low pH conditions, so not as vulnerable to ocean acidification, are the same groups that are very vulnerable to low oxygen. And so in these conditions, fish and crustaceans will be impacted by both stressors, the low oxygen and the low pH. For my PhD, I'm interested in these multi-stressor effects on bottom communities. And particularly, I'm interested in how pH change and oxygen change and temperature change affect bottom fish communities off of California. Although we've talked about how upwelling high carbon dioxide, more acidic areas, they're not immune to the effects of ocean acidification. And in fact, ocean acidification has been observed in multiple upwelling areas. And with the changes in chemistry that have been observed, we've also seen negative impacts on calcifying mollusks. The consistent findings are that things like oysters and mussels and pteropods and abalone are being negatively impacted by these declining pH conditions in upwelling systems. We also see changes in community composition. In these areas where pH has declined, you see shifts from calcifying mussels making up your community to more fleshy algae making up your community. So we're seeing real community shifts. And these community shifts and these biological changes, they're not just great for scientists to talk about, but they're affecting a lot of people economically. In the Northeast Pacific, in Washington and Oregon, the oyster hatcheries have experienced economic costs from this because their larval oysters are dying from the declining pH conditions in the water off their coast. So animals in upwelling areas are going to be increasingly vulnerable because they'll be experiencing these multiple stressors. In the future, they'll be experiencing more acidic surface waters, more acidic upwelled waters, increasing surface temperatures, and then also decreasing oxygen levels. And we really need to think about the impacts of ocean acidification from the cellular and organismal physiology to the greater level of populations and communities of marine organisms, and then to the food web, because it's a healthy food web that sustains our fisheries. And the US is doing a great job monitoring ocean acidification off of our coasts. What about other developing countries like Mexico and Namibia and India that just don't have those same resources but are in these really important upwelling regions? Since upwelling regions are so economically important, we have to think about how ocean acidification is interacting with other climate stressors to affect these marine communities. And I leave you with this take-home message that some of our most productive fishing areas may be the ones most vulnerable to the impacts of ocean acidification.
I am Nelson Lagos from Chile. I want to take that some time ago I worked with the fishermen in Chile trying to establish a management area where the habitat stock can be rebuilt to increase the productivity of this area. Those early efforts was promoted across the whole nation, and in fact, this result of this effort was now in the national regulation protecting some areas for the fishermen. For instance, for the periods of the open access to the harvesting, the stock was very low, but after the creation of this management area, the increase of population was observed. One of the most important resources along the Chilean coast is a marine gastropods called el loco, that means the crazy. The loco is founded in high density within this marine reserve, and it's very low abundance in the areas for open access. However, this model of the rebuild stock of marine harvested resource now is under a challenge because these reserves are located in the upwelling areas. As you know, as previously told you, Natalia, these areas are vulnerable to ocean acidification. The waters that is upwelled in this ecosystem was in contact with the atmosphere almost 40 years ago, when the atmospheric concentration of CO2 was almost 300 ppm. Now, when the concentration almost reached the 400 ppm, are absorbed by the. So in the next future, 40 years from now, 40 years from now, will be more corrosive, so more acidified, indicating this progressive ocean in the coastal web. The logo, in particular, is strongly sensitive to the change in ocean acidification. We make several studies about that and demonstrate that effect on calcification, on growth rates, metabolism, behavior, and morphology, for instance. In addition to the problem to the corrosive upwelling along the Chilean coast, we have the input of acidic rivers to the southern shore. In addition to that, there are net sinks for CO2 in the cold waters of the Patagonia. The Patagonia is particularly important because in this area is located the most important farming for mussels, but it is also classified. In addition to the local producer of the mussel farming, there are more industrialized, bigger farmers. But in general, all of them are really concerned because there are strong mortalities and low production of seed. Also show a strong negative effect on production, on biomass production of this. In fact, projecting those results, we found that almost 30% of biomass production of mussels in southern Chile will be reduced only by increased ocean acidification. The Patagonian ecosystem, as I told you, is a net sink for CO2 right now. So it's being acidified as the other part of the global ocean, the polar region, etc. And this produces along the Chilean coast strong changes for the calcifying of the organs. In fact, as I tell you, both mussels and these marine gastropods are impacted by oceanification along the coast, and probably the people relying on these marine resources could be more vulnerable to these impacts in the area. Well, to finalize, I want to tell you that in Chile in particular, there is occurring the ocean acidification right now in the upwelling areas and in the waters of the Patagonia. So it's important for us that this ecosystem service that provide the ocean sinking the CO2 will be recognized and used as an argument to reduce emission in particular. Thank you.
So on behalf of the Laos, EDI, and our friends from Cambodia, to give this chance. So it is my great pleasure to open this press conference and with Cambodia. And since as Laos and Cambodia since many years participating in this COPs, but now take the opportunity to actively getting involved because the effect of the climate change become more serious. Laos needs urgently better transfer of the adaptive technologies for the agriculture sectors. including research and development on the local technologies and agriculture extension packages. We share our concerns together with our neighboring countries, particularly with Cambodia, with whom we share this press conference together with our friends from UNDP and their country office in Vientiane and Phnom Penh. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sionpon. Just to make this chair here complete, we still have two officers here, Ms. Kinalon and Mr. Ulai Tan from the National Agriculture and Forestry Research Institute in Vientiane and from the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry. Let's now go into the background for this press conference. Let's talk about the main theme, the main reason why we are organizing this event here. This is about increasing problem in the Mekong River region. This is about millions of smallholder farmers and the threats to their livelihood that are coming up from climate change in that region. I don't know whether you are familiar with the Mekong River. The Mekong River is one of the largest river basins in the world, not as big as the Amazon, but for Asia, one of the larger rivers. It is located in Southeast Asia, and both countries together in the center of the Mekong River, Cambodia and Laos, they have 22 million people living there. Approximately a third of these people are living from less than $1 per day, and approximately 70 to 80% are making their livelihood from agriculture, forestry and fisheries. Amongst these 70 to 80%, there is a large majority of smallholder farmers. So farms that own a maximum of 2 hectares of agricultural land. And as you know, as you can imagine, agriculture is highly depending on the climatic situation, and any change on the climatic situation will necessarily affect those smallholder farmers, the poorest farmers amongst the agricultural producers. Closely related to that situation is food security in those countries. Both Laos and Cambodia, they have a good variety of different food sources from agricultural production, mainly to rice, but also to animals, to fish, and to products from the forest, non-timber forest product. But as this agricultural production is very much depending on seasons, on the rainy season and on the dry season, the flood and the drought coming with the season very much influences the situation of the agricultural production. That is always the case. This was always the case, and the farmers know how to deal with that. What is new now is that the rain doesn't come at the time when it is supposed to come. It doesn't stay as long as it is supposed to stay. And the dry season does the same. So that has been learned by the farmer, by the farming family. They are challenged by a different supply of rain and the dry season. And the production side, the agricultural production side, the technology to adapt with that is not available. So this new situation challenges the food security in the country, because the farmers need to adapt to this, and it also challenges the nutrition, the quality of the food available in the countries, which cannot be maintained throughout the year, not in the same way that it was the case without the climatic variations. So food security is an important part we have to consider when we talk about climate change in the Mekong region. I mentioned drought, flood and erosion. this is how the situation looks. You have probably similar photos and similar pictures from other parts of the world, but Cambodia and Laos, they are easily overlooked. Southeast Asia is all easily overlooked in the context of the big neighbors that they face. But this is the situation: drought, flooding of vast areas of land, erosion along the river, and flooding in the urban settlements as well. And as I said, the Khmer, the Cambodians and the Lao, they know how to cope with this, but because these events are now happening at different times, they need to have the capacity, they need to develop this capacity to cope with this. And this capacity is only slowly developing, it is limited, so the individuals and the institutional capacity needs to be developed quickly to address these matters in an adequate way. As mentioned by the representative from the Kingdom of Cambodia, the government has undertaken, together with UNDP, a few projects related to the Napa. So the Napa in Cambodia that we are presenting here is very much about water management, participatory water management, and improved rice productions. So here farmers are learning how to cope better with changing water resources to improve the quality of the seeds and the rice seed production, and to mainstream climate change into the planning and into the curricular development of Cambodia. So the government is active to address the changes, anticipated changes on the agricultural sector, but the resources are not sufficient. Similarly, the government of Lao PDR is addressing climate change in the agricultural sector as well. Here in cooperation with UNDP through a project called IDAS Lao, that aims on diversification of the farming system. So not only rice, but rice plus other products, agricultural products, vegetables, livestock, fish, aquaculture are introduced to the smallholders to give them more options to cope with climate change.